Hello, and welcome to the Current Science and Technology podcast from the Museum of Science in Boston. I'm your host, Susan Heilman, and every week we bring you interviews with guest researchers and our museum staff covering science and technology in depth. Nanomedicine is a word that's been tossed around more and more often over the past several years. And today we have the museum's nanotechnology correspondent, Corinne Tate, and she'll be talking to us about what nanomedicine really means in general, and then talk about a specific new type of nanomedicine and why this one is worth talking about, why it's new and different. Hi, Corinne. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Susan. I'm happy to be here.
So, what does it mean to be nanomedicine? That's kind of a word. It's just, nano is really just a word that's come out in the past few years, but how long has it really been around?
Well, nanomedicine is not a brand new idea. There have been nanomedical technologies, and when we use that word, it just means we're using nanometer-sized particles with some kind of medical use. So it just means we're using tiny particles in medicine. And there are some very mature nanomedical technologies that we are using every day to treat patients. But a lot of those are imaging agents, tiny nanoparticles that help us with MRI imaging, for example. Others are used for drug delivery. But the great promise of nanotechnology's use in medicine is that we can use it to be much more targeted. And that's been one area that's not yet fully realized in the field of nanomedicine.
So specifically much more targeted in cancer, because a lot of times when you have a cancer drug, it's just a poison, you throw it in the body, hope it kills cancer cells faster than it kills our regular normal cells. So how can nanomedicine help with that targeting?
Well, the idea is that if we can use a nanoparticle to treat cancer, hopefully it can do a few things for us. One is let us use less of this harmful chemotherapy, for example. So we're putting less of this poison into human bodies. But a really promising idea is that we can get these nanoparticles to find their particular target, find that tumor, find that cancer cell in the body, and deliver the drug right to that cancer cell without damaging any of our healthy cells or our healthy tissues around there.
And so that's what you'll be talking about today, is a new type of nanomedicine that's in clinical trials now, actually. So it's not one of those in 10 years we'll see type things. So how does this new nanomedicine work?
This is a really exciting new technology for exactly the reason that you said, that it's pretty well developed. This is the first targeted and programmable nanoparticle that has made it to human clinical trials. And that's what makes it so exciting. This particular therapy was developed by a local company called Bind Biosciences, and it spun out of the lab of Robert Langer at MIT and one of his postdocs, Omid Farrokhzad, who is now actually a professor at Harvard Medical School.
So their initial goal, I'm guessing, had something to do with developing a better nanomedicine, a better nanoparticle. What can the particle that they created do exactly?
Well, what they were trying to do is create a tiny particle that would deliver a whole bunch of chemotherapy in the body. So these nanoparticles have these targeting molecules on the outside, ligands, that target specific proteins that we find on the surface of cancer cells.
And not on regular cells.
These proteins are specific to cancer cells. For example, one of them is PSMA, a prostate-specific membrane antigen. But actually, we find those antigens on a wide variety of cancer cells, not just prostate cancer. So by making this nanoparticle good at hunting down and finding and targeting these receptors, we're able to deliver the nanoparticles right to the site of the cancer. Another very cool aspect to this medical technology, though, is it doesn't just stop with targeting. This nanoparticle is designed to do a few other things. One of them is it has stealth properties. These stealth properties basically let it evade the body's immune system. And that's really important because that lets these nanoparticles stay in circulation a lot longer, giving them the time that they need to find the cancer cells that they're looking for.
So normally if something foreign is in our bodies, our immune system is supposed to track it down and get rid of it, basically. But in this case, we don't want our immune system to do that. We want this nanomedicine to last as long as possible. What is it about the particle that helps it to evade the immune system?
It basically has this special protective coating made of a special polymer that helps it escape detection by the immune system. And actually designing these nanoparticles really required a very delicate balance. On the one hand, you want a lot of these targeting molecules, these ligands, but you also need a good portion of it to be protected so it evades the immune system. And getting that balance between the targeting molecules and the protective coating really required a lot of work and fine-tuning and testing a lot of different recipes, so to speak, of these nanoparticles until they found just the right one that was able to find its target most of the time and stay in circulation a long time to give it that opportunity to find its target.
And then, of course, one more piece is it has to have the chemotherapeutic drug. So that sounds like it's not on the outside because that would defeat some of this purpose. So it's on the inside of this molecule?
That's right. Inside this nanoparticle, it's filled with docetaxel, which is a common chemotherapeutic that's used against a wide variety of cancers. And that's the one they've tested it with right now. The inside of the nanoparticle is basically made of a special type of mesh that helps control the release of the medicine. So again, they can have different formulations of a nanoparticle that either release the medicine very quickly, or in this case, what they're trying to do is release the chemotherapy a little bit more slowly over time. And that's the other really amazing part of this nanoparticle. Not only is it targeted, but it's basically programmed to release the medicine at a controlled rate.
Wow, this sounds like it almost sounds like a little machine here. There's obviously no, metallic parts and microchips here, but this must be pretty difficult to make.
Actually, it's surprisingly easy to make, even though it does have all these complex parts that seem to work together so elegantly. It's not a very complicated recipe. They just have to get those few right pieces. They put them in giant vats and shake them violently, and basically the polymers self-assemble. They've really mastered the technique that they basically self-assemble in just the right configuration they need to make the nanoparticles do what they need it to do. So the fact that it's a simple assembly is what's really helped them, first of all, produce enough of these nanoparticles to go into clinical trials, but really gives it promising life as a nanomedicine that we could use widely because it's very simple to make.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more simpler than I thought. So you mentioned clinical trials. Where are they in clinical trials, and what results, if any, have they seen so far with how well this works?
This treatment started clinical trials in 2011, and earlier this year in 2012, they released some preliminary results from the trial that's ongoing. So it's a phase 1 clinical trial, and they released results from 17 patients, and they found it to be remarkably effective at targeting the cancer, getting the chemotherapy to accumulate at the site of the cancer, resulting in the tumors shrinking. And they were able to do this seeing no new side effects and actually seeing fewer side effects than they typically see with docetaxel. And also they were able to get results using smaller doses.
So all of the things you just mentioned are important in minimizing all these sometimes horrible side effects from these drugs. And so basically what you're saying is the side effects of docetaxel are still there, but less, and there doesn't seem to be any additional side effects from the nanoparticle itself, basically, that any side effects they're seeing is from the drug, and it seems to be less than it normally would be, which is what they're hoping. If you're targeting that one area and using less of it, you would expect to see less.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so exciting.
You mentioned that the ligand, which recognizes the prostate-specific membrane antigen, is on more than just prostate cells. So what types of cancers did they work with in the clinical trials?
So the patients of the clinical trial all had undergone traditional chemotherapy and were still struggling with their cancers. And they tested it with cancers that we typically treat with this chemotherapy drug, docetaxel. It treats lung cancer, prostate cancer, and breast cancers. But what was really interesting is that typically that chemotherapy is ineffective against people with cervical cancer or cancers of the bile ducts. And they found that using this treatment, they actually had positive results, that the nanoparticles were effectively treating people with cancers that usually don't respond to that particular chemotherapy.
Wow, so that's kind of an added bonus there, is not only is it working better at what you would hope it would, but even beyond that, it's opening up new avenues for cancer treatment.
Definitely.
So assuming things continue to go well with these phase 1 clinical trials, when can we expect the phase 2 clinical trials to begin?
And they're right now in the planning phases of those phase 2 clinical trials, so they are hoping to start those in the next year.
So in some ways, this nanomedicine we're talking about here today sounds almost too good to be true.
You raise a really good point that often when we talk about these nanomedical technologies in the research phase, and they sound so promising and so exciting, and sometimes they do get overhyped. And I definitely don't want to give that impression here, but this is a really promising step. The fact that this targeted nanoparticle is now in clinical trials, getting close to widespread use, and these nanoparticles can be a really important tool that we can use to target disease in a much more effective way than we've ever done in the past.
So it's not just the coolness of the molecule itself we're talking about here, but the fact that it's entered human clinical trials. That's kind of a new thing here.
Absolutely. And the fact that we are finally taking the promise of nanomedicine closer to clinical use. It's very exciting.
So thank you for sharing this exciting advance with us then, Corinne.
You're welcome, Susan.
That's it for this week's show, but be sure to come back next time for more of the latest in science and technology. This podcast is a production of Current Science and Technology at the Museum of Science in Boston, part of the Boston community for over 175 years. For more information, visit our website at www.mos.org/CST or email us at podcast@mos.org. Thanks for listening.